CHAISSON just publicly recruited Stefon Diggs to the Commanders, and Diggs answered back with a signal that in a minute I'll break down because it changes Adam Peters' entire quiet game plan. But while that was happening, Brandon Ayuk went after Jaden Daniels' mom, and Daniels' response was so cold it's already running through the whole NFL, and I'll tell you why this just closed the door on Ayuk ever wearing burgundy and gold. Then we get into Noah Brown, the Hail Maryland hero, because according to Philly special sources, he could end up in Philly, our most hated rival, and there's a contract detail that explains the whole move. And we close with Dorrance Armstrong, who's got exactly 1 season to save his spot in Ashburn, because the front office already signed 4 replacements while he's still recovering. Stick around, because this is just getting started. Raise hail. Okay bro, let's lay this out calmly because there is way too much information flying around and I want everyone to understand exactly where we stand right now at the wide receiver position for the Commanders. We have spent months, literally months, talking about 2 names to round out the receiver room behind Terry McLaurin. One is Brandon Ayuk, the other is Stefon Diggs. And this week, those 2 paths split apart in a way that, for me, no longer leaves much doubt about which is the better option. Let's start with Diggs, because he is the name driving this video and the one that has me most excited as a fan. Diggs is from Gaithersburg, Maryland. He grew up minutes from Landover. He played his college football at Maryland in the very stadium where he trains today while he waits for a team. This is not some mercenary evaluating a city on a map. This is a guy who has lived in the area his entire life, who spends long stretches there even while playing for Buffalo, for Houston, for New England, and when Fox 5 DC sat him down for an interview a few weeks back, he did not give some generic public relations answer. He said he genuinely thought about it, that it was one of the first things that crossed his mind the moment he became a free agent. He said he felt the same energy he felt when he chose to go to Maryland for college. And he said, word for word, that it would be a moment if this works out. Let's get to the numbers, because this is where the argument becomes almost impossible to dispute. In 2025, with New England, Diggs finished the regular season with 85 receptions, 1,013 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He played all 17 games. He helped the Patriots reach the Super Bowl for the first time since 2018. He posted an 83.3% catch rate, a career best, and in yards per route run, that metric I use constantly because it separates real talent from system production, Diggs finished 5th among the 30 eligible receivers with at least 98 targets on the season. 5th in the entire league, bro. At 32 years old, in his first year with a brand new quarterback, at that age, with that level of production, he's still reading coverages better than almost anyone in the league. Now the uncomfortable question I have to ask as an honest analyst, why hasn't Adam Peters signed him yet? And this is where the part I find genuinely fascinating comes in. Peters has stayed completely silent, not one public statement about Diggs, nothing. And my theory, the one I have been holding for weeks now, is that Washington was waiting to settle the Ayuk situation first before committing money and a roster spot to Diggs. Well fam, if that was the strategy, Ayuk handled it himself, and in the worst possible way. Let's get into the Ayuk situation, because this is genuinely a masterclass in how to destroy your own market value in real time. Ayuk has gone practically an entire year without playing a single down in the NFL since tearing his ACL, his meniscus, and his MCL back in 2024. The Niners voided the guaranteed money remaining on his extension because he did not participate in rehab sessions. Then they placed him on the reserve list after he stopped showing up to the team facility. And instead of handling this privately like any professional trying to get back on the field would, Ayuk decided to run a public campaign on social media, calling his own team dumb and stupid for giving him the very extension he signed. But this got a lot more serious for us Commanders fans when Ayuk decided to go directly after Jaden Daniels. A Niners fan approached Daniels at a World Cup match and yelled an insult aimed at Ayuk. Daniels calmly laughed it off, nothing more. And Ayuk, instead of appreciating that his supposed future teammate did not stir the pot, posted a video literally calling Daniels a mama's boy, said he was a grown man and that Daniels was going to have to start hiding behind his mother before he'd believe anything Daniels said. Look, I know Daniels' mother is also his agent and travels with him everywhere, so publicly insulting her is not exactly the smartest move if your plan is for that same quarterback to help you land a job on his team. Daniels' response was surgical. He posted an image of Kevin Durant giving the thumbs down. And when Ayuk kept pushing days later, posting another video claiming Daniels wouldn't answer his phone, Daniels responded directly with 3 words that are already circulating across the entire NFL corner of the internet: "Enjoy retirement, pal." That to me practically closes off any realistic chance of Ayuk landing in Washington, and I don't say that with any joy, because as a fan, I always wanted to see that Arizona State reunion work on the field. But look, I could be wrong on some detail here, and even so, the pattern is too clear to ignore. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler summed it up better than anyone a few days ago. He said Ayuk keeps nuking his own job prospects, that he talked to multiple teams trying to give Ayuk the benefit of the doubt, and none of them could find any strategic sense in what he's doing. Fowler even directly mentioned that Washington could very well pivot toward Diggs, or toward Keenan Allen, instead of continuing to wait on Ayuk. That did not come from some angry fan on social media. That came from a reporter who talks to general managers around the league every single day. And now back to the signal that gives this video its name. This week, CHAISSON, the edge rusher the Commanders signed in free agency who played alongside Diggs in New England, posted his public support for Diggs joining Washington. Diggs responded with 2 emojis, eyes glancing sideways, and a little devil. Now, I know that sounds small when I say it out loud, but in the context of everything we just walked through, a current roster player publicly recruiting, and the star responding with a clearly positive reaction, flirting with the idea, that is exactly the kind of smoke that precedes an announcement. I don't have proof the deal is done. Nobody does yet. But the direction of the wind changed this week, and it changed in Washington's favor. My personal take, and I want to be direct about this, I believe the Commanders signed Diggs before training camp opens. Washington has close to $44 million in cap space, 3rd most in the entire league. They don't need a lengthy contract. With Diggs entering what would be his 33rd season, it makes sense to think about a short 1-year deal with incentives. And unlike Ayuk, Diggs is available right now. No messy exit to manage. No draft pick compensation owed. The only real risk I see is age and natural wear from an 11-season career, but that risk is manageable on a 1-year deal, and it is infinitely more manageable than the emotional time bomb Ayuk represents in a locker room. For Jaden Daniels, this would be massive. McLaurin remains solid, but he needs real help behind him. Someone who can win on intermediate routes and understands how to work leverage against veteran corners. Diggs did exactly that with Josh Allen in Buffalo and with Drake May in New England. The scheme transition wouldn't be an issue. The chemistry with Daniels, given both of them are from the same area and share that same mentality of wanting to give something back to their community, could build faster than usual. Fam, if this gets done, and I increasingly believe it will, we are talking about one of the best low-risk, high-impact decisions Peters can make this summer. And I want to pause for one more second on the tactical piece, because I think that's where the strongest argument actually lives. Diggs isn't a receiver who depends purely on raw separation against young corners. His game is built on timing, on selling the route before the break, on understanding exactly when a zone defender loses inside leverage. That's precisely what a new offensive coordinator could exploit if Diggs enters the scheme. With Antonio Williams still developing as a rookie, with Diami Brown and Luke McCaffrey competing for secondary snaps, Diggs would give Daniels a reliable number 2 option from week 1. No learning curve, no dependence on a rookie breaking out ahead of schedule. And on a roster coming off a playoff berth, that kind of immediate certainty is worth more than any bet on the future. I needed that breather after all the Diggs and Ayuk chaos, and what comes next hits a little closer to home, because we are talking about a player who, no matter what happens next, already earned a permanent place in this franchise's history. Let's talk about Noah Brown. Across his 2 seasons with the Commanders, Brown made roughly $3.9 million total, and honestly, you could argue that money paid for itself on a single play. Everybody remembers it. Jaden Daniels' touchdown pass as time expired to beat the Chicago Bears, the play that will forever be known as the Hail Maryland. The gloves Brown wore that night are already on display in the Hall of Fame, next to an end zone pylon signed by both him and Daniels. Nobody can take that away from him, no matter what happens with his future. But football is a cruel business, and 2025 was a season to forget for Brown. He played just 4 games, with 10 receptions for 83 yards and no touchdowns before landing on season-ending injured reserve on December 16th with knee and groin issues. A day before that news broke, Brown posted a spiritual message on Instagram about life life's storms and keeping faith, something that honestly says a lot more about the man than about the player. And I want to be respectful of that because nobody knows what a professional athlete carries when his body starts betraying him right when he needs it most. Now, according to Anthony DiBona of the Philly Special Show, the Philadelphia Eagles could sign Brown as a low-cost addition as they retool their offense following the trade of A.J. Brown to New England. DiBona described it as more of a spark than a full-blown fireworks show, but noted that Eagles general manager Howie Roseman will keep working the free agent market before training camp, just as he already did by signing 2 players out of the UFL. Look, as a Commanders fan, this brings up mixed feelings, and I'm gonna be honest about it. On one hand, I completely understand the football decision. Brown barely played, his body isn't cooperating the way it used to, and Washington has younger, cheaper options behind McLaurin. On the other hand, there is something deeply uncomfortable about the idea that the man who gave us one of the most incredible endings in recent league history could end up wearing the green jersey of our most hated division rival. That's the part of the football business that never sits right, no matter how many times we live through it as fans. My honest opinion is that if Brown signs with Philadelphia, it'll be a minor depth role, almost a locker room veteran presence. It won't change the fate of either team's season, but if we ever see him score against us in that jersey, it's going to sting in a very particular way. And that's the most human part of this sport. Honestly, the heroes who become history and then, without meaning to, become someone else's locker room villain. And to close things out, let's talk about a name almost nobody is mentioning this offseason, but one I find to be one of the most interesting cases on the entire defensive roster. Dorrance Armstrong. Before tearing his ACL in Week 7 last year against his former team, the Dallas Cowboys, Armstrong was playing the best football of his career, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that. Through those 7 weeks, he led the entire NFL in pressures, with a 15.4% pressure rate and 22 total pressures, including 5.5 sacks. Pro Football Focus gave him an overall grade of 77.6 out of 100 across 239 defensive snaps, a massive jump from the 65.3 he posted in 2024. But what really impresses me, what people aren't paying enough attention to, is that his run defense grade jumped from 41.4 to 77.5, and his tackling grade went from 28.7 to 82.3. A pass rusher just running hot doesn't improve all 3 of those numbers at once. That's a complete player with real gap integrity who turned into a 3-down threat. And right when he hit that peak, it all got cut short. Head coach Dan Quinn said before minicamp that he liked the trend of Armstrong's recovery and continues getting updates, but that there's no set timetable for his return. Meanwhile, and this is the key part of this story, Washington did not sit around waiting. They signed Odafe Oweh, LAVON CHAISSON, and Charles Omenihu in free agency, and added Joshua Josephs out of Tennessee in the 5th round of the draft. 4 new additions to the edge rusher room while Armstrong is still recovering. They haven't replaced him, but the game plan for 2026 no longer depends on Armstrong coming back as exactly the same player he was before the injury. Armstrong also enters the final year of his 3-year contract, carrying a $12.055 million cap hit in 2026. That, combined with the new depth the front office brought in, tells me one thing pretty clearly. Washington has already started mentally preparing for life without Dorrance Armstrong starting in 2027. I could be wrong. But I believe if Armstrong shows up healthy to training camp and proves that grade jump from 2025 was real and not a 7-game mirage, he locks down a rotational spot in 2026 with no problem, and probably a new contract elsewhere if Washington decides not to bring him back. If he doesn't get back to that pre-injury level, this season could quietly turn into a silent goodbye from Washington. The drama isn't on the field yet. It's in every August practice where his body has to answer the only question that actually matters. And that wraps things up for today, fam. Look, we're leaving this video with completely different emotions. On one hand, the real possibility of Stefon Diggs putting on his hometown jersey has me genuinely excited, and I honestly believe it's going to happen before camp opens. On the other hand, we're probably saying goodbye to one of the most beloved heroes in this franchise's recent history, and watching Dorrance Armstrong quietly fight for his spot while the defensive line fills up with new faces. That's football. It gives you a Hail Maryland with one hand and takes the hero away with the other. But this franchise keeps building, Peters keeps moving pieces, and Jaden Daniels, with or without Ayuk, keeps being the center of everything good coming for this team. If this video gave you something, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me down in the comments. I genuinely want to read every single one. Would you sign Diggs right now, or wait to see what else pops up on the market? See y'all in the next one. Hail to the Commanders!